Why, hello there everybody. Thanks for clicking on this video. And as the title is suggesting, this is just giving Jonathan an update on where I am with that knife that I was forging. We were forging a little while ago, making him a new snake flint striker. And at the same time, I was forging out myself another knife. So before I get into where I'm at with this, let me just give you the context, and in particular, the material that I'm using. Okay, if you're not familiar with this, if you're familiar with earth scrapers and case Gannon scrapers, earth scrapers, this is the scraping edge. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, this one's got a big curve in it. A few years ago, the gentleman that runs the weigh station grabbed two of these full length right out of the waste metal bin, and I got them. This is basically tool steel, and it's very, very hard, and it makes very good knives. Let me show you what one item that I've made out of it already. So here's a belt axe that I forged from that material. It is a split eye. It's not folded over and welded. And this is just my personal belt axe that I carry with me at rendezvous or when I'm trekking. It's quite the little chopper, and if I need a hammer pole, there it is. Now I've made a couple of knives out of this material already. I've sold them since then, but the design that I'm going for is similar to this. Now I forged this out of a old file. Poured silver pins and a poured silver front right here. Okay, and I do like putting those little notches in it just for decoration. There's really no practical purpose. So this is the style that I'm going for. I personally like carrying this. It's not a fighting knife because, you know, quite honestly, we don't fight with knives these days. You know, that's about as stupid as bringing a knife to a gunfight, right? Or bringing a bow to a gunfight. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We just don't do that this day and age. Okay, so I started out with a block about this size, perhaps a little bit thinner. I'm planning on making a tomahawk out of this sometime in the future. I don't know when future's going to be, but sometime in the future. And like all my knives, to stay consistent, I make a pattern. Okay. Now Jonathan was here. He saw me weld the end of that steel to a bar so I can keep it into the forge and get it good and hot. And I got it drawn out. I drew it out, and one of the things that I had to overcome right away was not having enough length. Okay, because where I welded it on the back end of here, I could see the weld right here, and it just wasn't quite long enough for this. But to overcome that was pretty easy. Instead of drawing more metal out, I used my forge, and let me just show you real quick. Actually, I used my anvil, and I found the curvature on the anvil that matched the curvature that I needed for the blade, and you can still see remnants of the chalk mark. So I took the flat blade and I forged the curve in it, and as I did, that forced the handle area to get a little bit longer, and it also forced the knife to get a little bit longer in the blade. So I'm actually about an inch longer than what I was shooting for, which is perfectly fine, because this style knife, for me, is a really good working knife. So there's the knife. Got some cleanup work to do. It has not been hardened and tempered yet, because I like doing all my cleanup work and anything that I need to do with the knife while it's still soft. But that's the design. I have 3 center holes right along the plane here so that I can pour silver, because I like pouring silver pins because it also aids in keeping the wood attached to the handle along with JB Weld. But I actually pour the silver, and what I do is I drill straight through and then I concave it so that when I pour the silver, you know, you basically creates a wedge on both sides that locks everything in place. And then the additional holes here are for the JB Weld so that that JB Weld can get through to both sides of the wood along with the poured silver. But I've got a little ways to go yet. I think what I'm going to end up doing today, and I get it fairly straight, the little bit of crookedness can either be, it's probably going to get filed, sanded out basically, because I've got some more cleanup work to do, as you can tell. But what I'm looking to do today, Jonathan, is to normalize the blade. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it in the forge, just simply because I don't need to normalize the blade with coal. I just need a heat source to get this up to cherry red, and then let it cool naturally. I'll probably just bury it in the sand and let it cool slowly. And I will probably do that a minimum of 3 times. So I guess that's all I have to say about that. I'm going to get to normalizing this. I'll use my propane heater to do that. I'm going to box everything in to contain that heat right there. And maybe I'll just show what I do. So stay tuned. Actually, before I get to that process, let me show you how I mill my blade. You know, unlike the guys on Forge and Fire, they've only got a few hours to, you know, get a knife blade, turn it in, and do the handle and everything else. But when you have, you know, enough time to do this properly, you can really come out with or produce a real quality blade. I don't have a lot of tools, don't have a lot of grinders. I just use what I have. So let me show you how I mill my blades to get a good flat blade. Get yourself a couple of really good magnets. These are for welding when you need to weld different angles and things like that. I put one on the handle and one on the blade. It keeps it flat, keeps my hands from getting hot or even too close to the sanding edge. And I only have a 6-inch sander right now. Excuse me, a 4-inch sander. I used to have a 6-inch, but the motor burnt up on that. Let me get the camera positioned and I'll just show you real simply how I do this. It's all I do to mill the blade. I'm not too worried about what's going to be the grind for the knife edge, but at least I'll get most of the handle area and what's the back of the knife ground flat, and it also gives me an opportunity to put a taper in the knife also. And I'm doing this right now. Hold on. There we go, that's a little bit better. I'm doing this right now just simply because in one of the 3 steps of normalizing, and I'm going to bring it up to cherry red, let it cool no less than 3 times because I want the metal to normalize. During that process, probably the third heating, I will probably stamp my initials in it. So I want a good clean spot to stamp my initials in the blade. So as you can see, I just built myself a little small furnace to trap as much heat as I can and transfer it to the blade. When the blade gets cherry red, I'm going to go ahead and stick it in the dirt and let it cool slowly. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do this process 3 times, and on the 3rd heating cycle, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my initials in the blade. Alright, I have the blade normalized. That's what it looks like. You can see the initials I've got stamped in there. And these chalk lines just kind of give me an idea where the handle's going to end. It's going to be a wood handle, Babinga, and I plan on pouring silver, and that's about where I want the silver to end. Where I'm at right now with this, as you can see, I've started following one little decorative cut right here. I plan on putting probably 4 or 5 on each side, stagger them, and I'm going to use a smaller diameter round file and do the same thing on the blade. It's kind of like one of my signature things. To me, it just adds to the uniqueness of the knife. I also took and flattened the blade out right here on my table sander, so it's flat. Then what I do is I color it in with a Sharpie so it's black, and then I figure out the width with my dial caliper, cut that in half, and then I'll take whatever that half is and I'll scratch down the center. I don't know if you guys can see that scratch down the center, but that's the center of the blade, or thereabouts. Over the course of time, I've made one of these grinding jigs. The way that works is you can clamp the blade right into the jig here and then run it across your sander. I have a 1-inch belt sander. That's what I will be doing most of this with. Okay, but that's how that works. And then depending, and I usually start with a real shallow cut, and then I'll deepen it and deepen it so that my grind, and I like using a chef's grind, and that's why I made this, so that I can get a straight grind from where I want the plunge line to be to the edge. A lot of knives that you see that are commercially made have a hollow grind, and if you look at it, you can see that little bit of a dip in it from the plunge line down to the cutting edge. Those type of edges are stronger than what a chef's grind would be, but they're a little more difficult to resharpen when they go dull, whereas a chef's grind will sharpen up real quick. And I have family members that are professional chefs on the East Coast, and they're the ones decades ago that kind of introduced me to the chef's grind. And why? Because up until then I used to do like everybody else. I got to put that little curvature in there, and I was never really happy with the way those knives stayed sharp. They seemed to go dull a lot quicker. But anyhow, before I harden this, I'm going to get my plunge lines in here, and I'm going to get some of that metal removed. Not all of it. I'm going to do that now while the metal is still soft and easy to work with. I've got some more sanding to do on it. I want to get some of the forging marks out of it. For me personally, I really don't care, because I like the looks of a handmade knife, and that's what this is going to look like. So I'm going to get busy cleaning this up, getting that ground down, and when I get to the point to where I need to harden it, turn the camera back on, you can watch that process also. So you can kind of see how this device works, and you can see the plunge line that it creates. And I put a little mark right on top with some chalk, because that's where I want the cutting edge the knife edge to actually stop, that's going to be the curvature of the silver, the poured silver, and then that'll be the stop line with the knife edge. So, just a little demonstration on how this works. So just in case anybody is curious, how did my plunge lines and the grind turned out? Well, as I mentioned before, and hopefully you can see, I didn't take it all the way to what would be the knife's edge. When I get it to this point to where I'm comfortable with it, with the grind, and as you can see, it's got just a little bit of a curve right here. I've been sanding on it already, but there's just a little bit of a curve in the plunge lines. The device I made is not precision, but it's good enough for me, because what I'm doing now is I'm taking a flat file that I made specifically for this, and I take 120 grit sandpaper, and then I'll clean up and straighten those lines, and I'll continue that bevel right to the knife's edge. Although I'm going to stop short of it being sharp, just simply because I want a little bit of material so that when I heat this up to harden it, it won't burn away. So anyhow, I'm going to continue the work, cleaning up the blade, and I'm going to leave some of those hammer marks in it, just simply because I like to see a knife that's got some hammer marks in it, showing that it's truly hand forged. So I'm going to keep at it, and at the next point I think it's time to interrupt. I'll interrupt and show you where I'm at. So here's a little interruption. When man first learned how to fly, they had to get the pitch of that propeller just perfect. That allowed mankind to fly. Once they started getting into the production of airplanes, especially with the wooden propellers, they would do is they would hire blind people to sand the propellers. One reason they did that is because a blind person can feel the imperfections in a wooden propeller blade, as opposed to somebody saying, yeah, that looks perfect to me. And that's one of the techniques that I've learned over the decades making knives, especially with the chef's grind, to close my eyes and feel where I need to remove metal. And I can tell you by doing this side of the blade is a little bit thicker right up in through here. So I'm going to go to sanding some more off of that metal, or more off of the blade, so that as I close my eyes, both sides of the blade feel equal to each other. Just my technique. Getting there.